Question. When someone does something that is negative for you, why is it so important to find a way to communicate it to them? Here's an example. I was talking to a friend and they said to me, they said to me, I was like, hey, there's a really good book called Cognitive Behavior Therapy for Dummies, Managing Anger with CBT, Cognitive Behavior Therapy. And they're like, oh, anger has no place. I was like, that's not true. And I responded. And then they're like, oh, by the way, Joseph, when you responded that way, not right away, it told me like 15 minutes later or something. They were like, Joseph, when you responded that way, it actually was felt very negative. I was like, oh, thanks for telling me. And said, yeah, it sounded like you were the tone of voice was really, really upset. I was like, oh, no, I wasn't that upset. And they said, yeah, and the thing is, you kind of felt like you were shutting me down, so then I'm less likely to say things again in the future. I was like, that's really good to know. I didn't realize it came across that way. And they said, yeah, I could tell you didn't mean to come across that way, so that's what I'm telling you. And that's really insightful because I've actually had colleagues or friends tell me, oh, I could tell you didn't mean to come across that way, so I ignored it. But then they still get annoyed, right? So if I didn't mean to come across that way, then tell me so I don't do it. And wouldn't you all, if you say something that doesn't come across the way intended, would you all like people to quietly ignore it and then get annoyed at you? Would you like them to tell you that it's coming across that way? And I think the other point the person made is, they said, well, actually, it's so sad that so many people, when there are these misunderstandings, so you say something and someone else, it lands differently than you intended. This happens to all of us constantly, right? People just don't tell us. You can imagine there have been times when you've walked away from people, they've walked away from you. But if you just talked about it, actually, you might have been able to find it. And it's uncomfortable, it requires some tact, but it can be far worse to not talk about it than talk about it. So what do you take away from this? What could you do differently as a result of this? What you'll do differently after watching this? Can you think of a time when someone says something to you and it lands in a way that you think they didn't intend but wasn't great for you? You can try and bring it up. You could say, hey, do you mind if I just share how I interpret what you said? And they then pretend to say yes and say, it sounded like you were a bit annoyed. Were you annoyed? And then that's it. Just be gentle there and they're going to be aware of it. And say, it's not a big deal, we're just checking. Or you come up with your own version. And Google this. Google or go to ChatGPT and say, when someone says something, just plug the content of this video into that ChatGPT. Or when someone says something and then it came across negatively for me, what are three examples of things I can say to them to kind of raise it in a sensitive way that they'll be happy I raised it, even though I feel uncomfortable doing so? So what do you all take away from this? What are some next steps? What could you do differently as a result of what you heard from this video or one of the 20 things you heard in it?